right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome back to week 2 of WAM's newly elected boot camp 2021. I hope everybody got my email from earlier today. Obviously, the couple quick changes to the agenda, the original agenda, and I sent out the link to the new one to folks. Joe had actually gotten into a lot of the meeting content in his last presentation that was originally on the schedule for today. Basically covered the entirety of that batch of information. So ethics and conflicts of interest was one that we were going to split the day with today. Obviously, it's a big subject and very important subject. So what we did is we moved strategic planning up to today. So Joe will do strategic planning, and then next week, Amy Bach, who is the city attorney for the city of Rollins, will be joining us to talk about ethics and conflicts of interest. So we hope everybody can join us next week for that one, because that's a big one, and it's a really good thing to learn off the bat, given the legal ramifications of some of those facets of ethics and conflicts of interest. So with that, we will probably be done just a little bit early today, given that we're just covering the one topic. So we'll be able to get you guys in and out a little bit quicker. It probably won't go all the way to 5:30. So, but with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Joe Coyne, lead presenter and co-founder of Community Builders Incorporated. Go ahead, Joe.
Thanks very much, Justin. I want to also make a quick comment on the topics. As Justin pointed out, we did, in fact, discuss different types of meetings, executive meetings, special meetings, and hearings last week. We also talked a little bit about the Wyoming Open Meetings Law, and public records are included in some of that. I want to just circle back real briefly to that topic to let you know that there is a bill proposed, and it is Senate File number 17, that takes a look at changing how you actually go about publishing your minutes as a municipality. This moved along again, I believe, today. Justin might be able to give an update on it, but basically there's a move afoot here to allow municipalities to simply post their meeting minutes online and avoid the expense of having those minutes publicized. And so that's definitely something that you're all going to want to pay attention to as you move into your newly elected positions, and it's something that I know WAM has been following here as well. And so one way or the other, that bill is going to be addressed, and when it does, I understand it's going to have an impact on how you guys actually handle your minutes. Other than that, the topic is still just intact as we had presented it, and so what we'd like to do today is to jump forward a little bit into the strategic planning session. And this is actually a class that I mentioned last week. It's one of those core topical areas that we feel everybody needs to know more about. And in particular for newly elected municipal officials, we feel that this is an area that gets you started on solid ground with the sense of, what do we need to do in order to actually move our community ahead. And so what I'll do in this class today is to talk to you about how to be thinking and how to be planning strategically how to get things done in your community, because most of you know by now that if you actually want to get something done, it takes more than a good idea, a good vision for something that you would like to see in your community. It takes hard work. And so the core part of strategic planning is just that, identifying how we make this change. How do we move from point A to point B? How do we make our community a better place? And so how we develop a plan to do so and develop a plan that actually can get implemented and get things done is really the heart of everything that you're going to be doing in your new role working for the municipality. And when you think about it, there are just tons of reasons to engage in strategic planning, but the ones that I want to bring your attention to this afternoon focus on, the concerns that municipalities have. Let's be honest, we don't have enough resources to go around to get everything done that we would like to get done. There are definitely taxpayers out there that want to see our municipalities do more with less, and you guys are doing a great job going in that direction. One of the ways to do that is to get focused, to set some priorities, and to identify the key things that you absolutely must get done in order to survive for next year, in order to affect that change that you maybe had promised your constituents. You need a plan to do it, because there's not enough money and people and other resources available to get things done. And so one of your first things that you should be doing as a newly elected official is thinking through what can I realistically get done while I'm here. Maybe you signed up for the next 4 years and you've got a long-term plan. Well, I'll just tell you from my experience, and probably with yours too if you've been successful, the only way you get things done is by working with other people, especially at the municipal community level. So we want to make sure that as you do that, you are able to get everybody on the same page and make sure that those that you're going to be working with understand here's where we're going. And so when we engage in strategic planning, it's not just about setting those priorities, but rather arriving at a consensus for what those priorities should be and building the buy-in of people that are going to be working with you on that project. You also, at the very earliest stages, need to really, come to a point where you've got a shared vision. You understand what it looks like when you get there. You recognize it when the job's done. That's what's motivating everybody to get these things done. And so you need to be able to get other people involved. You need to get them motivated because this is something that they recognize as being important for your community. And then hold folks accountable. Talk about how you're doing as you move through your plan, and make sure that there's good communication and transparency throughout the community to understand, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's how we're going to be doing it. All of that is really, in a nutshell, strategic planning. And that's true whether you're talking about a municipal strategic plan, which many of you are just now starting to look at. This is typically an annual plan on what your municipality wants to get done this year. You would go about a strategic plan also if you were to develop a comprehensive master plan or a comprehensive master development plan. Lots of communities have been updating those comprehensive plans, or comp plans, as many of you define them. And that can be a very engaged, lengthy process to really come up with a plan on what the future of your community looks like, and where and how it will develop, and where you've got excess capacity, and where you need to maybe build capacity for future growth. Most of you also have other kinds of plans, like economic development plans or capital improvement plans, or even, just the plan to get a gazebo in the city park, a project plan. All of those things are projects and initiatives and action implementation steps that you can be taking to make your community better. And what I'm telling you is you should take the same kind of approach to be thinking and collaborating strategically to get things done in your community. So no matter what kind of plan it is, and some of these are big deals. We understand that you need to understand how you're going to develop your economy. So you might have a standalone plan for that, and you might have your accountants and engineers focus on the comprehensive master plan. Regardless of who those stakeholders are, your community, in order to move forward in a purposeful manner, needs to have a plan to do that. So you'll encounter lots of these different kinds of plans in your role. as a leader for your community. A couple of these plans we really do focus a lot more on, even as part of our core teaching. We think it's important that you understand how you go about building a plan to develop your community and to develop your economy. Likewise, you need to annually be preparing a financial budget and then managing that budget. Those are very important topics for municipalities. And so we offer standalone classes on those topics. I'm going to be pulling from some of those other classes today to teach you, again, more broadly how to be thinking about strategic planning, because these are concepts that you're going to apply again and again. I'll tell you, as we start thinking about a planning process, this is going to sound maybe too academic and too fanciful for some of you, but the best practice out there is to plan how you're going to plan. And I know that sounds goofy, but if ultimately your goals behind doing a community plan, whatever it might be, it should be to involve the community. They should be sharing with you from the earliest stages, what they want to see in their own community. Likewise, if you want to build buy-in from local businesses in the chamber, you got to include them. And so when I say plan to plan, what I'm doing is suggesting that as you get started to think about the need for the plan, think inclusively. Think about what it is you really do want to study. I mean, nobody wants to go to a meeting without an agenda, and nobody wants to work on a project without a plan. We need to identify what's truly important for the community, and to do that, you need to have key components of your community involved at the very earliest stages here, in order to make sure that your plan is going to succeed. And so think about what it is you're going to plan, what kind of resources you might need, whether you need a facilitator or you need an engineer or an accountant or somebody to come in to provide technical assistance and expertise. Think about how long it would take in order for you to develop whatever your plan might be in terms of time and money. None of us plan anything in a vacuum anymore. I mean, literally every plan's been invented and been done. Planning shouldn't be as hard as many make it to be, especially when, we've developed plans for these generic topics, frankly, year after year. This is something that we should actually be able to identify and follow best practices. You don't have to reinvent the wheel for any particular plan at the municipal level. We're not doing anything here that's so innovative that it hasn't been done before. What we need to do is to look at how others have successfully planned through implementation to success. How have they gotten things done? And so this is where it's super helpful as you develop your strategic plan to maybe talk to some of your peers. If you're in a large city, talk to the other folks that are leading a large municipality in Wyoming. If you're in a small town, talk to how other small towns have done this. Learning from your peers and from the folks at WAM is a great way to make sure that you're engaged and doing things in a way that not only others will recognize and be able to support, but that you can go out and market your community as being on top of these things and making sure that you are planning for your future. As you think about how you plan for the planning process, be thinking broadly here. How can we get more people involved in making the decision? The more people that are involved, the more, frankly, more muscle power you're going to have with people getting involved in supporting it. They'll talk about it in the coffee shop. They'll show up for a work weekend if that's what's included in this. And so be thinking very broadly about who might benefit from this plan. And sure, if it's a community development plan, everybody in the community is going to develop from it. But think carefully about who will benefit specifically from something like a community development plan. Well, you're talking about, developing new homes and subdivisions. That means your contractors should get involved and your bankers should be involved if you're going to be looking at a new housing development. Likewise, real estate brokers if you're talking about a housing need. If it's transportation, then get the transportation folks involved. Whatever that topic might be thinking broadly about who might have a dog in that fight and get them included. Couple ways that you can make sure that the public is involved. First of all, invite them. Let them know that you're going to be having a planning meeting or kicking off, a discussion about your goals for the year. Invite them. And when you invite them, invite the press also. Making sure that the media is involved or at least aware of what it is you're doing is a great way to take the pulse of what your community really is fired up about. So talk to your stakeholders and identify, are we going the right direction? Is our general direction sufficient, or are we at a crossroads? Lots of communities right now, for example, are recognizing that our life is no longer as normal as it was a couple of years ago. The new normal includes an awful lot of people working at home. How has that affected your community? Similarly, while many municipalities are doing okay in terms of excise tax collections, if you look at the reason for that is a lot of people are shopping online, and we're doing a better job at capturing online sales. But how has COVID affected our moms and pops downtown? How has this affected Main Street? Are we at a crossroads for how we engage our public? These are all things that you need to be thinking about as you make your decisions about, the planning process. Likewise, whatever that plan is, you need to understand how it could be used. A development plan is one that
Well, looks like we might have lost Joe's connection. He does it over the phone, so let me send him a quick text, and we'll have him rejoin the meeting here. Sorry for the delay, everybody. Joe's obviously working to get himself back in. I have gotten a couple of emails or messages through the chat, folks that said they have not been getting the emails, like the session one wrap up or the pre-session stuff that I sent out this time. If that's the case, do send me a message in the chat. Just direct it directly to me. You can select the recipient there, and just make sure that I have your proper email there, and I'll double check that against our registration records. I apologize if that's been going on. Do double check too. For whatever reason, a lot of spam filters get pretty active when things have a lot of links and those messages. Of course, we've got the links for the Zoom and as well as to the videos and those kinds of things. So sometimes it'll get sorted out in the spam filter. So just double check that. I will have the video and the presentation from this week up again on Monday. Now that I know what's involved with the compression and stuff, hopefully a little earlier on Monday than I was able to do it last time. It takes quite a while with a couple hours of video to compress it and then upload it to the net. So are you back, Joe?
I believe so. Are you able to hear me again?
Yep, you're good.
So sorry for the dropped call. I had a little trouble finding the phone number to call back in. So where I dropped off here was talking about the planning process and thinking through whatever it is you're going to be planning, how will it affect people? Those are the people that you want to get involved, and the sooner the better you want them involved. And so think broadly also about, who all will our decisions affect here? What kind of pulse do we need to be taking out in the community in order to understand what people care about and how we can actually know when things are done with that plan. And so what you're going to be doing then as you actually create a strategic plan is go through a number of steps. And I think it's helpful to think this through and think through these steps as you initially are planning how to go about doing the plan itself. As I said, we'll oftentimes start with identifying who's going to be affected by this, who's got a dog in the fight. So identify and include those stakeholders. Identify what kind of data you need. I mean, you're going to be collecting input, subjective input from stakeholders. That's everybody's opinions and their 2 cents worth. But you're going to want to match that up also with as much objective data that you can possibly find. For example, if you're providing services to your community, one of the things you want to know is, how are we going to pay for it?
Hey, Joe.
Well, we pay for it. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, can you reshare your screen?
Indeed. And are you able to see the screen now? Good. All right. So as you are going through these steps, be thinking about what it is you need for each step, and start to come up with, who's going to go collect this data. If you're doing something that depends on municipal revenues, then maybe you need to be paying attention to, how much money you're collecting or how the local economy is doing. If this depends on general fund monies, you're going to want to be paying attention to excise tax data, for example. Gather, the input from your stakeholders, and then have somebody responsible for merging the objective data with what your community is saying. Merge that objective and subjective input together to create a draft to define what the problem is, review what the potential solutions are, and then make recommendations. And as you start writing this stuff, start sharing it with your stakeholders, with your planning committee. Let them continue to weigh in on this before you come out with a final plan. And as they do that, you can also be thinking about how you might get any one of these particular goals or objectives completed. Break down bigger goals into smaller action steps that you can assign to specific people or groups in order to get things done. And as you break down those action steps, identify both from terms of time and money that it might take to get it done, but identify, some of the performance measures like higher excise tax collections, and start monitoring those things from the very beginning. And that way, when you do start seeing some progress, people can see it truly develop in real time and be able to feed back to you some of the ways that you can continue to make things even better in the future. In fact, I'm a firm believer that all strategic plans should continually be reevaluated and updated as you make progress, add new goals, so that you can continue to make improvements to your community. So think through those steps as you're planning how to develop the plan. But as you do it, think through really the 3 fundamental questions that every strategic plan needs to address. And that starts with, where are we now? And it ends with, where do we want to be in the future? So trying to figure out what steps need to be taken in between in order to get there is what this is all about. So the better that we can define, here's what today looks like, and the better that we can define the vision for where we want our community in the future, and the better that we can define what our mission as the municipality is in accomplishing that vision, then we can start to identify things that we specifically can impact in order to get things done. So where are we now, where do we want to be, and how do we get there in the future are really the three things that every strategic plan digs into. I'm sorry, I clicked that 2 times. So let's start with where we are now. What you're trying to do here is to do an environmental scan. And when I say environmental scan, I mean, yeah, maybe you do look at the environment per se, but you're looking at everything that matters. You know, from a stakeholder perspective, from an objective data perspective, from the way that different people look at things. You know, you want to be able to look at things from multiple different perspectives. And that should start with what your stakeholders are saying is important to them. You know, listen to what stakeholders are telling you.
Turn your volume on your machine.
As you gather that input, you can start to organize it according to what we call a SWOT analysis. SWOT is just the acronym SWOT that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. What a SWOT assessment does is it allows you to start thinking about your own organization and how it relates to what's going on outside of it. And it's broken up into a matrix like you see here for a few reasons. First of all, you're going to be looking for things that are good and things that are bad, things that are helpful versus harmful. And then secondly, what you're looking at are things that are true about your organization internally and things that might be going on externally. And so, for example, if we were to look at a common strength that we're seeing right now across municipalities in Wyoming, maybe it is your staff that works for the organization. They've been there for a number of years. They know what they're doing. And in difficult times, you want experienced staff. One of the things that might be internal but harmful, though, might be the very real threat that all of you are facing by having staff not in the office every day, or maybe even catching COVID, or not being able to come back to work. And so you've seen some downtime, and that's been harmful. You've had people getting some things done outside of the shop that maybe have been harmful. Are there opportunities and threats out there? Well, the ongoing presence of COVID certainly has created some ongoing threats to all of us, but there are also opportunities here. And so thinking about what you can do to take advantage of this is a smart thing. Justin and I were visiting the other day, and he commented that, a lot of smaller communities are now reaching out and doing more with technology now. They're doing Zoom meetings and even doing virtual council meetings because they have to in order to be able to get things done. They've had to take advantage of some of those opportunities that are out there. And so I think every problem comes with a mix of, strengths that you can build on, weaknesses that you need to address, opportunities that you can seize, and threats that you're going to have to fend off. And so when we take this first step to identify where are we now, you want to start thinking in terms of a SWOT analysis. And think about things in terms of, today. If I were to take a snapshot of our community today, what is its population? What is, our median income? How are people doing? What's our unemployment rate? When you take a snapshot of where you are, depending on what the topic is, it can, be a look at a variety of statistics or even the weather or finances, or maybe it's different from one part of your community to another. And so when you're trying to identify where we are today, think broadly about it. I think it's also important to take a hard look at what got you to today's position. Take a look at the background documents that are out there. Say, for example, you are, like many municipalities right now, working on your budget for this next year. How do you go about doing that? Well, one thing you could do is to pull up the budgets from the last few years, and if you've got a recent audit report, pull those documents out to determine, how well do we do things in the past, and what are the numbers, just as a broad, how much do we spend on this department, how much do we spend on that department, is a great starting point. You should also pull together any legal documents that are going to have an impact on whatever your plan might be. If you're looking, for example, at a municipal budget, then there are things that you can and cannot include in that budget, written right into state law. You probably also have a municipal code or ordinances that already apply to that topical area. So get familiar with those. Those set the boundaries of where your decisions can go there. If you're doing a broader plan like a master plan or an economic development plan, take a look at what has been accomplished in the past. Look at previous strategic plans and their successes and failures. Take a look to maybe identify why they didn't succeed or why they did succeed, and either copy or address whatever those findings might be. Likewise, like I've told you, nothing that you are likely to plan has to be planned, for the first time. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you're doing something that other groups have already accomplished, take a look at how they did it. Use the guidance that others can give you about things like your budget or about whatever that project might be. So learn from what you've been able to capture from the past. You don't have to duplicate it. You'll typically want to actually change things so that they are more in tune with what would work for your community. But there's always a way to learn how other people have done this. And then as you dig into things and start to draft or even reach a point where you have found some interesting data, share that with the whole team. I don't like to see bundles of paper. In fact, one of my pet peeves is people that hire us to do plans and then print them out and leave them on a shelf instead of actually using them. I'm not going to encourage you to cut down trees here, but create an online website that can keep the public informed, and post whatever the documents are that you're finding, even the preliminary ones, so that people can say, oh yeah, I saw that. You might want to take a look at what these folks over here did, and create a blog to allow people to actually weigh in on the documents and the preliminary findings as you go. The more inclusive that you can go with this, I think the better final product that you're able to have. So build on your on the background documents and the things that got you to where you are today, and leave that door open for people to also explain, here's why it happened in that particular way. Likewise, when you are trying to define where are we now, you want to take a look at any other data that might be out there. I particularly like to look at demographic information, not so much from a snapshot, where are we today, but rather how have we gotten here over time. And I like to look at, for example, demographic trends that have been developing. Financial condition, you can pull the financial statements for your municipality going back however long you want and take a look at what those documents tell you. One of the things that I encourage newly elected officials to do in particular is, when you're trying to collect data, is to ask, why did you guys collect this data in the past? How did you use this in the past? Financial statements can be changed. Make them work for you. Having a column that says, here's what we budgeted and here's what we actually spent is helpful. But if it's more helpful for them to do the math and to give you, a percentage comparison, ask for that. We can do that kind of thing. So collect data from whatever source you might have. If you're trying to figure out your waters and sewers and rights of way, then you're going to want to take a look at an engineering report. If you're talking about, whether we want to widen or narrow the street downtown for Main Street to address parking, you might want to listen not just to the engineers, but what your citizens are saying, or other indicators of people that are, angry about a particular topic. Maybe you even have protesters out there. So collect all of the objective information that you can that's relevant to your topic. It'll help explain where you are, as well as help to identify some ways to measure performance in the future by being able to illustrate, here's what we've changed. As you work throughout the process, leave your door open also to include more stakeholders. Sometimes people will join your planning effort only after it's begun because they hadn't heard about it. They didn't realize they had a dog in that fight until you started to publish some information or something popped up in the newspaper, and then suddenly people want to get involved in that. Anticipate that and understand that you can go a long way by reaching out to those folks ahead of time and then leaving that door open to them. So take the time to invite your Chamber of Commerce folks, to invite all of your local elected leaders and key staff at institutions throughout your community. Talk to prominent businesses and taxpayers. Make sure that people at your council meetings know that you're going through this process, and invite them as residents and encourage them to stay engaged. Again, I think it's important not only that you identify specific stakeholders, but that you always include the public. And one good way to do that is to make sure that you are always giving notices to the press, to the media, about meetings as they come up. The thing is, as a council board, you're going to have to think of your constituency in a lot of different layers. It's not just the people that voted for you and then everybody else. Whether people voted or not, you represent your community, every resident that's there. And in many instances, the decisions that you're going to make even affect non-residents. If you're a typical community, you probably have people that are doing business in your town but don't vote in town because they don't actually have a house within the municipal limits, but they do run a business there. And so when you think about your role as a new mayor or council person or a key staff person, recognize that your constituents cut across a lot of different layers. And that's important when you do your stakeholder analysis and you try to figure out who might be affected by this decision. Because you can't just turn to the people that got you into office. That may be where you want to start, and it might be where your comfort zone is. But you must reach out to other people, other neighborhoods, maybe where you don't live, or business people that you're not familiar with. And you need to be thinking not just about yourself and maybe your family, but future generations. What are we doing for our youth? Are we being good supporters of our local school system? Because that is one way that we do keep our youth here in our community. Whatever that topic is, be thinking about all the different hats that your constituents wear, and understand that there are probably stakeholders or potential stakeholders there for you to be listening to. Get them involved early in the process. The other thing that I like to encourage, both from stakeholders and from your core planning team, is to focus not just on a vision and a mission, but to be thinking also about values. What kind of values does your community really have? And it might be different from community to community. I've discovered, for example, that when it comes to things like water, everybody's on board with protecting water until they're told they can't do something on their own property. And then it becomes a private property right. And so you need to understand that people have different values, and sometimes they're at conflict with one another. Likewise, the ideas that your citizens might come up with could be equally contrasting, equally competitive, and in conflict. And so how do you support all of those? Well, I think that at this stage of planning where you're gathering input, what you're really trying to do is to listen and to understand what the other people are saying, to hear folks and to validate what it is they're saying so that they do have an understanding that you get it, that you're appreciative of their comments. Sometimes it takes multiple meetings. You got to say things over and over and over with people. You also want to make sure that you're addressing, the rumor mill. Most of us in small communities understand that perceptions are often reality. And so you want to make sure that not only are you transparent, but that you're proactive and that you talk about why you're doing the plan and why you reach some of the preliminary decisions so that you can allow people to vent or to share whatever their thoughts might be about the plan. And so you want to make sure that it's not a one and done process, but every planning process should start with, once you've identified stakeholders, figure out what they want, figure out what they really care about, and identifying their core values, either through the newspaper or through public meetings or just a general sense of folks at the coffee shop. These are helpful things to know. It's also helpful to know that as you're gathering input, people are listening to you too. But your priority at the early stage of any planning effort should be to listen, to seek first to understand what people are saying, and then later on to be understood. Especially if you're a leader involved in a planning effort, your first goal should be, frankly, to shut up and listen to what other people are saying. Make sure that you are hearing them. Repeat back to what people are saying so that they are affirmed, that they understand you get it. A lot of times public meetings are not well attended unless it's a very controversial subject. And then, the people that like to talk loudly always show up. But oftentimes public meetings are poorly attended because people don't want to be singled out. People don't want to be the sole person speaking, and they're uncomfortable with public speaking. So find ways to get meaningful input in another way. Meet them where they are. Do focus groups if you need to. When I was in Douglas, the city council did a great job of actually going out into the crowd, into the people that were attending the meeting, and just informally visiting. Prior to the time that the meeting needed to be gavelled to order, but they would take the time to listen to people. Everyone has a unique perspective, and everybody should be valued. And so it's easy to find the common ground the more you talk to people, but don't make assumptions. It's important to really go talk to people and to listen to what it is they have to say. And here again, you can be funneling this subjective input through a SWOT analysis. Understand that all plans really need to identify that snapshot of where we are from this perspective. This is the SWOT analysis is where you get your core implementation action steps, because you do want to build on strengths. You do want to address weaknesses and seize opportunities and defend against threats. And so you want to be thinking both in terms of the objective data and the subjective input that your citizens are giving you in terms of SWOT analysis. That then will help you flow into some idea generations and some specific projects that can then get your particular project done. So synthesize that objective and subjective input together. Again, I like to, whenever possible, take a look at things in terms of their trends instead of a snapshot here and a snapshot there. Trends can oftentimes help inform, what really has been driving this particular change. With monthly gas production, you can see in the graph that's here that whatever this purple substance is, that's been growing a lot since the last 10 years or so. We should probably figure out why that's the case and then build on that. Things that have been producing power forever, power plants, are now suddenly threatened. They're on a decline because of global markets, because of political agendas take your pick. How quickly will the revenues from coal plants decline? Well, you're going to want to be informed of that. And to know that, you're going to want to look at, well, how much has that power plant been helping us up until now? You know, what kind of jobs has it provided? What kind of tax benefits has it provided? What is the risk if those tax revenues go away? And so you'll want to gather this kind of information from, you know, your demographics, from your economy. Social demographics are also important. Understanding where we are technologically. I know a lot of you have started to be thinking in terms of more high tech, especially with regard to your own council meetings. There's lots of change afoot with our environment, particularly with a new president in Washington. There's some new things have come down that have really driven a stake of fear through the hearts of many in Wyoming because of the effect that they might have on oil and gas. So you want to, excuse me, take this scan of all of these different trends and synthesize them all together so that you have a broad understanding of, again, where are we now? Incidentally, when you start to collect real data, I want to make a pitch for municipalities that stay focused on official data. You know, you don't need to go out and hire a consultant to figure out, you know, what's going on in your community in terms of demographics. There's great information out there right now. You have access to it, and there are folks out there that can help you sort through it. But absolutely, use the data from the U.S. Census Bureau. It's the gold standard for the data that is available. Likewise, the state of Wyoming, which works hand in hand with the Census Bureau, has, you know, great information with regard to property taxes and excise taxes, jobs. You know, our gross domestic product is even available now on a county basis. You can get so much official data that you should not be paying for anyone to go out and analyze your economy for you to figure out what's going on. You can do this with official data, and simply starting with the state and the United States Census Bureau will get you most of what you need. A lot of those official sources are actually getting very good at helping you prepare, for example, profiles of your municipality, of your place, of your county, and help you put together, you know, these infographics that allow you to present in a very, you know, attractive way. Here's what the numbers are for our community. And, you know, you can use this kind of official data to compare yourself to other communities. And that can be helpful if you're trying to figure out where should we be. But it's also helpful as you start to look at best practices, you know, for small communities. You might want to compare, you know, head to head. What are communities of my size doing about these things? And so use the official data whenever possible out there. And as I said, a lot of this stuff is being developed in some awesome ways to present what your findings are graphically. You know, this particular national map shows by county the ancestry with the largest population in each county. And by looking at this nationally, you can certainly see some trends and some islands of ancestry throughout our country. But it's interesting to see how we compare to others. You know, if you were to just do your county and discover that it's, you know, a blue county or a pink county, whatever, that's not as helpful as looking at something in the context of what's going on around you. And so whether that means, you know, comparing your community statewide or nationally, this can be helpful so that people can understand your community and you can understand as well what's unique about it. Here again, two thoughts I would recommend as you gather data, that you try to look at trends, especially long-term trends with demographics. And secondly, understand that you don't have to do this by yourself. I'm always willing to help, but there are people that can actually get paid to help you at the Business Council and at the University of Wyoming Research Center. There are folks that'll help you put together a demographic profile for your project and to do it in current time for free. So use their resources. They're out there to help you. You don't have to jump into this and learn everything. Let them help you get these things done, and you'll find that the final product is going to be that much better and that much more collaborative by having their help. So then the trick is to match up your picture of where you are today with your vision, with where you want to be in the future. And this is where really fleshing out your vision to the most detailed and is helpful, but not necessary. What do we need to simply change? What are the top 2 or 3 things that we could change to make life in our community better? And you can start to pick some of those things out of the SWOT analysis that you had done. And again, just using that simple strategy of building on strengths, addressing weaknesses, seizing opportunities, and defending against those threats, those can start to identify, things that the group or even your objective data have illustrated, so that you can then start to get input on which of these do we prioritize, which of these things can help move us from this current picture to where we want to be in the future. And so that becomes the second part of your evaluation. You got to know where you are. You also need to know where you're going to be going. And as Peter Drucker has said famously, if you don't know where you're going, then any plan will do. But once you have developed that vision, and once you've developed that snapshot after your environmental scan, you know where you are today. That then shows you, 2 different places, here and now versus there and in the future. And so what you'll then do is figure out what needs to change to get us from here to there. Your mission as a municipality really is just what's your role going to be in changing the community. And as community leaders, as especially elected leaders and key staff members, your mission really is your job. Your job is to make things better in your community, to improve the community of life, the quality of life, to make sure that everything is getting done that needs to get done, and that we're constantly finding ways to become more efficient or more effective or better at what we're doing. This is your job. This is what are you going to be doing as a municipality to make things better in your community. And as you define those, here's what your role is going to be moving from today to tomorrow, this is where you should be guided by your community's values, whatever those values might be. Typical ones that I see in small communities are, we want a better community, we want a cleaner community, we want our youth to stay, but we don't want to tax ourselves. And so we've got very limited resources. Okay? So what can we really get done within our values? If our value is no new taxes, then we've got to do more with less. We're going to have to figure out what we can do as volunteers, as community members that are pulling together, pulling on their own bootstraps. If we don't have resources, then it'll be my role as a community to go out and try to find those resources, or to become more efficient with the few resources we have, so that we can spread them further. So those are how those 3 things interplay with, again, the snapshot of where we are today and with where we want to be in the future. That's what the vision is. The mission is your job in getting us to accomplish the vision, and you're going to be guided by those community values as you move through this. A lot of communities, a lot of planners, I should say, skip that part, the guiding values. And I think that's a mistake. Too often we develop a vision and a mission, and then we leave it there. I've literally seen times when, people were told, do whatever needs done to get this accomplished. Just don't break any laws and don't tell me about it later. That's a get her done kind of attitude without any real community values. I would suspect that in many communities, that's going to be a problem. People are going to question why it is we are just any way will do. And so define what these might be. I mean, maybe you are in a community that is grounded in certain values that are reflected in your culture. That is how it works. If you have a community that has a very strong culture, it's probably based in long-standing multi-generational values. And so get those down on paper and make sure that your plans are consistent with those. That can be just as important as the goal itself. I mean, do the ends really justify the means? And I would say oftentimes in community work, no. How you get things done is every bit, if not more important, to actually getting it done. I mean, if you lose the essence of your community, if you lose your uniqueness just to accomplish something, then you haven't really been true to yourself, true to your community. So make sure that values guide you through this process and don't allow, whatever it takes to get it done to always get you there. Some of the community values that I like to promote within municipalities start with integrity. Do what you say you're going to do, and hold the community responsible to be involved, but be doing things that encourage your community to actually support you. Every project, I would hope, that comes out of City Hall comes out with strong support from the community and essentially a mandate. It's the kind of thing that gets discussed during your election cycles. A big one for many of us is ownership. We need to own the projects that we are engaged in. It's not enough to be, on the team and just mail it in. You need to get involved, and whether you're excited about this project or not, if it's one that your community has decided this is what we're going to do this year, and maybe you wanted to do the next project down the road, help them out now with this one. Get involved in the community, not just in a project. And so ownership in the community really is important. And I think that needs to be modeled by community leaders, people that are elected, need to own doing the right thing. And that shouldn't be a plan B or a plan C. When I teach my workplace harassment classes, I teach and I honestly believe everything begins with mutual respect. And doing the right thing really is a reflection of respecting other people, respecting, that other people might not always agree with us. And then finally, I think you need to be able to do your job. You need to be competent. If you've been elected to do something, you're doing the right thing by figuring out today and through this series, how to get your feet wet, how to actually learn how to run your community. And thank you for that. Congratulations for making that step. Your competency is definitely something that WAM is going to take seriously. But these classes aren't going to be everything for you. If you've got follow-up questions, talk to me, talk to Justin, talk to one of your peers. Competency is something that we've got to work on throughout our careers. And so hopefully these are the kinds of values that you have as an individual, and they're the kind of values that you can instill in your community as well. And so be thinking about how we go about doing things, and guiding values are really front and center there. I want to hit home a little bit harder also on this idea of ownership, because I've seen some folks just not really get it. I've seen employees, and I've seen elected leaders do this too, that'll basically push back away from the table and say, "Not my monkey, not my circus," or it's not my job. We're short-staffed. It's not my fault. There's an excuse for why we haven't done this. That's not ownership. You know, it might be entirely accurate, but you know, let's move away from making excuses. We're community leaders. Let's own this and say, it's okay to say, I don't know the answer, but I'm willing to dig into this and try. I'm willing to do as much as I possibly can. And sometimes that might mean, you know, you've got to take your hands off, but you can at least encourage other people to get things done. And you can take responsibility for the things that you do commit to doing. And understand, too, that the very nature of a community is a group of people living together in one community. That's a team approach. We need to be able to share things with them, to share ownership. That means we share successes with other people and failures. And personally, the way that we share failures is by when a mistake is made, the trick should be how can we learn from this and avoid it again in the future? We, not pointing blame at Joe or whoever else made the mistake. And so I think ownership often means a real buy-in to your community, but it needs to come from you personally. It needs to be about what I will do, what I am doing. And I will take ownership of this community. I've been entrusted either through being hired or appointed or perhaps being elected by my community to do this job. And so it really is important that we model that particular value each and every day. As I said earlier, your mission is defined by whatever your core role is going to be to accomplish the community vision. You know, maybe we've all got a pretty picture of what we want our municipality to look like next year. How do we make it so? And what's our organization's job to do this? Well, as a municipality, oftentimes your very existence is defined by, you know, your responsibility in providing municipal services, whether that's roads, water, sewer, you know, law enforcement protection, fire department protection, whatever those key things are, and they're defined by statute, whatever contributions that you're going to be making there, your role as the city is to directly provide those things. And so you want to do so efficiently and to be a good steward of taxpayers' money. You want to do so effectively so that, you know, whatever it is we're paying for gets done the correct way. And that's the real value that we give to our citizens. You know, when I moved out to the Carpenter area east of Cheyenne for almost 5 years ago now. And one of the things that changed for me is instead of being hooked up to city water, I've got a water well. And when it went out, I had to pay 100% of the whole cost of that well. It was very expensive. And it brought back a fondness for me of when I lived in Douglas. All I had to do was to simply call the city, and they would have come and, you know, fixed whatever the breakage was. And if it was on my property, I would have had to pay for it. But the value of having a distributed water system is so staggeringly huge that we don't really pay for the real value of it in our bills. We calculate our bills based on what it would take to maintain and eventually replace that water system. But the value is probably far more than what we're charging people for. And that's a good thing because we do that, we're able to do that because collectively there's some real economies of scale when we do a well and distribute clean water to all of our citizens. That gives them a return on their investment that's worthwhile, far more than if they had to pony up the kind of money that I did to put in a new well in their backyard. And it provides for, you know, a better stewardship of that precious water resource. So when it comes to water, there's lots of things that we do here that add value to simply getting water to our residents. You need to understand how that works. Likewise, if you have a fairly, you know, limited scope in what your mission is, the Cheyenne Police Department's mission is stated here. You know, they exist to protect the legend of Cheyenne by working in cooperation with citizens to lead the charge in preventing crime and defending the rights of the community. They understand what it is they're protecting, the unique part of Cheyenne, which is the legend of Cheyenne, and maybe Cheyenne Frontier Days and the legend that's associated with it. They understand that that's the vision for Cheyenne, but their role within that is focused on crime. And they're the leading crime fighters in Cheyenne. And so they've clearly stated that in their mission statement here. They understand that's the value that they're making to their citizenry. I want you to understand, regardless of what your mission is, if you're trying to create some kind of change in your community, you need to understand that you really do need a strategic plan to get that done. Because even simply knowing what your values are, knowing what your vision and mission is, if you don't have all of the pieces of a strategic plan put together, it's going to fail. If, for example, you're trying to make a major change in your community, to do that, you need to have a vision. You need to have the right resources, the right people with skills to get things done. And I mean, not just leadership skills, but worker bee skills in order to get things done. If you want to affect change, you need to have incentives in place. Everyone needs to have not just a dog in the fight, but they need to see some upside to making sure that this plan succeeds. And as we look at resources, they come not just in the terms of skills, but do we have the money to get this particular plan done? Or do we know where we're going to go ask for money? And even if you have all of those things together, you also need to have an action plan. If you don't have an action plan, if you've got great ideas, skills, incentives, and resources, you're probably going to be looking at a bunch of false starts where people don't really know where to start, so they take one bite of the elephant from over here or from over there. If you don't have the resources to get it done, people will become frustrated. If you don't have incentives for folks to stay involved, there's going to be resistance to your plan. If you don't have the right leadership, if you don't have the right worker bee team in place to get things done, it's going to make people worry about it, anxious about it. And if you've got a cloudy vision, nobody quite understands exactly what you're wanting to do, but a rec center of some sort would be good for the community, that's going to lead to confusion because nobody really knows what you're talking about. So if you really want to get things going, you do need to have that vision and the mission, and you do need to understand what those values are. And that will start to then help you flesh out who exactly is going to be doing this work, and how do we incentivize it getting done? How do we pay for this? And what are the steps that we need to take? What are the steps that need to be implemented for us to actually accomplish that change? And so you need to have the full plan ready to go in order to make anything really happen. So the way that I like to present these is I like to start with what that vision is. If you can think about what tomorrow looks like today, if you can identify what the community is going to look like, what their residents are going to be, what do they, what kind of jobs do they have, what kind of uniqueness do you have in your community in the future? How do you get there? What do we need to change? What do we keep? What do we drop? What do we need to still create in order to get this to become a reality? What you're really trying to do is to create a statement about a vision that's so enticing that it encourages other people to say, yeah, what if we did it that way? What if this were something that we had? Once you've started to identify, what your community might look like in the future, here are some things that I have frequently heard from stakeholders. Many times, especially recently, people are talking about we want our community to grow and to be economically diverse. We don't want to be subjected to the boom bust cycle or to the whims of any one industry. Others will tell you we need to stay focused on youth, keep them in our community, and be forward-looking, get youth involved in the planning of our community. Others typically, just want to have fun. They want to know what recreational opportunities are out there. What can we see and do in our community? Others are going to be, focused on, making sure that we grow in a planned way. And some people mean by that slowly, so that we can absorb growth over a period of time. Other people mean, well, when they use that phrase planned growth, what they really mean is zoning, and it should be attacked. I want to share with you that it could be both the above. What does your community want? And so use the words that work in your community. For example, the last community that I worked on started out thinking we need more affordable housing. As we started to pitch that concept of affordable housing, we ran into the same problem that we had years ago when we needed affordable housing, and that is lots of people have in their brain an image that affordable housing is always low-income apartments. And we got pushback on that. And so what they meant was instead making sure, our growth is planned. Let's plan it for the people that are already here. And so instead of affordable housing, they wanted us to use the phrase workforce housing. We want housing that can be afforded by people that are already working in our community so that they can have a better quality of life. And so words mean different things to different people. When you boil it down, though, most people, just want to be able to live, work, and play without interruption, without interference. And the more opportunities that exist for them and their families to be able to do that, the more strongly they're going to support whatever direction that you're moving in. That's what hometown pride looks like. Let's build an attractive community, a community where I'll be proud to say I'm from this community, and you should check it out. It's an awesome place to raise your kids, or whatever it is. And so brainstorm based on your vision, based on that SWOT analysis. What do we really want here? What can we be building toward? What's unique about us that we need to continue to keep here? And there is a lot to be said about that. I've heard from a few strings of professional consultants telling me that retail marketing of your community really works. You just simply need to identify what the unique part of your community is. What is its unique draw? And things like the pride that Saratoga has, where the trout leap in Main Street, that defines their community. And even today, 20 years ago, you go to Saratoga, and these are the things that they promote. They're outdoor recreational opportunities. They continue to think big, and they understand that our uniqueness is, maybe their airport combined with the recreational opportunities that are there. It's one of the few places that you can land a jet in Wyoming, and I've seen dozens of jets there at the same time. Hop on a bike and go down and fish, right there on Main Street. It's an amazing place. They get that uniqueness, and so they literally put it right on their T-shirts. They put it right into their vision statement. They want people to understand this is us. And so I encourage that kind of thinking of, what makes us unique, and then focus your vision on that. Whatever it is that keeps you unique, you want to make sure that you keep that. Flip side of that, if you're trying to move your community from one spot to the other, from how do you turn your vision into a reality? You got to be thinking about what things do need to change, what needs to be strengthened, what is broken that isn't currently working, and get it on the list and figure out what can we do to make it work better in the future. That's the planning process. As you break down your broad vision into smaller pieces of what it is you want to get done and specific things that need to change in order to get your community from point A to point B, that's the roadmap that you're developing with actionable steps that can be taken to get things done. Now, I'll tell you that consultants and facilitators have lots of different ways to go about helping you identify goals and objectives for your strategic plan. And I think a lot of people overthink this. What we're talking about here with goals are just specific projects and efforts, specific things that you can be doing that collectively all of those things form a strategy. The objectives are just simply what the outcome will be, what will the result be of accomplishing that specific goal. And you can look short-term or long-term at these, but I like the SMART goal process. The acronym really works here. You're looking for specific projects that you can get done, specific changes in how you actually get things going, and that creates a goal. What makes it measurable are simply that the findings of your objective data. How did we identify that this was a problem? And how can we identify that we're going in the right direction, or maybe going in a particular direction a certain distance? How can we measure that? And a lot of economic data can and should be used to back up your goals. So make them measurable by tax dollars or tax revenues. Attainable simply means that it's something that you can get done. It's realistic. It's not, a shot at the moon, but rather, last year we had 24 instances of this thing happening. Next year we want to have 36, because it means 36 families are coming to take a look at our community. So make it realistic goals. Relevant goals simply just means that by accomplishing that thing, you move your community that much closer to accomplishing their vision. And you should always make them time-based. Is this something that we think we can get done in the next month or the next year or the next 10 years? Associate some kind of time, and I like to use specific time frames, a month, a year, or whatever. But you can also just say it's a short-term goal. We're going to be working on this year, but understand that aspects of it are going to be carrying over into future years. I think it's important, though, to have a time-based review period where you go back to see, have we made progress? Have we accomplished that specific goal? Some of you might add to these SMART goals a few other things like, who specifically is going to be in charge of running the team on that goal, who specifically is on the team by name, how much money is it going to cost, and how much money do we need to allocate out of the budget for this. So you can make these as specific as you want to, but the more specific you make them, the more likely they are to get done, the more likely they are to get done in a way that you are proud of and can be held accountable for. So as you develop those goals, understand that collectively you get all those goals together. What you're creating is an action plan or an implementation plan. And this is really no different than, understanding that there are a lot of different players or stakeholders involved in whatever decisions you make, but that you need to have a specific plan for that play in place before you get started, so that everybody knows where they're going to be, everybody knows what their assignment is going to be, and then you run it and you make an evaluation over whether or not it was successful or not, whether we want to run that play again or maybe come up with a different plan. As you start to be looking at project completions, support your leaders, but understand also that sometimes you might need to change your leadership. You might need to give them some more support in order to get things done. Let them be the leaders, though. That's how you build buy-in, and that's how you build accountability. When you've chosen your leaders well, and you've given them the resources to get things done, empower them and celebrate their successes. Don't second guess them. Give them the resources that they need in order to get the job done, and check in with them to make sure that they've got everything they need in order to get things done. Listen to them when they come back because they're frustrated or because their first efforts were not successful. Go back to the drawing board and figure out, well, what can we do differently to expect a different outcome the next time we try to run that play. It really is kind of like coaching any sports team. You need to understand who the players are, what their skill sets are, and put them in the right place at the right time in order to succeed. As you build the specific projects and action steps that you want to take, eventually you'll come up with a series of these things that, taken together, can be considered a plan, where you've got maybe 2 or 3 or 4 action steps that move your community closer to the vision, and you've spread those across maybe 2 or 3 major goals of your community. So, for example, one of the plans that we've done, I don't remember which community this was for, it might be right. They wanted to develop more options to allow people to get around the community. And so they talked about things like, a trails master plan, and implementing the Safe Routes to Schools plan, and even developing some new bicycle routes within the city. When they developed the action steps for those particular things to occur, they wanted to identify also right there, what are the outcomes that we expect? What's the timing going to be? Who are the players, and what are the resources that are going to be involved here? So they used a sort of a modified SMART plan here, but this was what they felt they needed to do in order to be able to broadly look at things from time to time. And then, when they go through their review process, they can check these things off if progress has been made on them. And if not, they can question, who the players are, question why it was they did or didn't get done, whatever that step might have been. So the key to that is really to have specific actions that need to get done. Make sure that you are providing for those actions to get done. This is not the time and place for unfunded mandates. Rather, this is the time to say, all right, if we're going to do this, who's going to be doing it? And you have the nitty-gritty conversation with your staff that, hey, if Joe's going to be working on this, something else has got to come off of his plate. He does not have time to take on more. And so you've got to figure out how you can incorporate that action plan into your day-to-day operations, and how you can support that step, particularly if you've got a budget for it, and allocate some monies for it. You want to also make sure that in order to successfully implement your action steps, that there's somebody in charge to look over that action plan and to manage those operations, again, according to whatever the values of your community might be. But you need to have someone responsible for reviewing and updating that plan, and asking for progress reports from people that are responsible to get things done. That's how you then make sure that those steps are not only getting done, but the plan itself continues to evolve. We have found that one of the best ways to do that is to get both subjective and objective input built right into your planning process. And so one of the things that we do when we set up a plan is we will ask whoever the leadership of that action step might be to give us a quarterly update. And we just expect that to happen every quarter until this project is done, or every month, or every week, or whatever makes sense for that particular thing to happen. But require that those progress reports go to whoever's managing the plan. And then ask the people that pulled together your objective data to do the same thing. to be looking to see whether the progress report from your staff or from whoever your leader is consistent with what you're seeing objectively. If you're not seeing changes happen lockstep, or if there's something wrong there, that's an early indicator that maybe your effort is going to fail, and maybe you need to revisit what that action step was. And so monitor performance both objectively and subjectively. If this is something that you're in a position to do, I encourage organizations to literally push their strategic plan right down into employee performance reviews. You know, if you have held your public works department responsible for XYZ project getting done, then push that all the way down into the job descriptions and into employee evaluations. I'm a firm believer that, you know, the things that we take the time to measure are the things that actually get done. So give credit where it's due, push that responsibility as deeply into your budget and your operating system as you possibly can, and then monitor it. And don't wait for a year or two to pass to realize this isn't working. You know, it's okay to make changes in the plan. And again, if you've got to make changes, that's not a bad thing. You know, especially if you've gone about your planning process correctly with lots of stakeholders, you can hold the whole community responsible. You know, just because it's your job to collect progress reports and to monitor the plan, whether it's getting done or not, that's a reporting process. You're not the one who should be hung if it fails, but you might be the one that gets hung if you don't hold yourself accountable and effectively let people know here's where we are. And so I like to develop my performance measures in such a way that we've got accountability and that anyone could see it. In fact, I think we've been playing with some of these with some of the new cloud databases that are out there, and there's some very cool stuff to build the dashboard so that you can understand where you are now, where you were, you know, a year ago, and to be able to do things graphically and numerically. Some people just, you know, don't like the numbers. They want to be able to see it spelled out on a graph. And so if you can come up with a dashboard that, you know, covers your strategic plan, whatever it might be, and you can fill in the data so that, you know, you can just put it up on the website and anybody who wants to can take a look at it, that's ideal. You know, if you can create a link so that people can see the progress reports online as well, you know, or maybe even be able to blog or share their comments about some of those things. That's how you keep plans alive, and that's how you keep them moving forward and constantly changing. The fact is, you know, most of the time we never fully accomplish our vision before we change the vision and we make it something even better. You know, we don't get there and then stop. There's a constant push to improve the quality of our citizens' lives and a constant need to be doing more with less. And so that friction's never going to go away. But by having, you know, some sort of a measure, whether it's a fancy dashboard like this or some report out at council, it's important to keep your community involved and to allow them to know here's where we are with this project. And if we've had a setback, share it as a setback. You know, they happen. We're all human. We all make mistakes and we all get curveballs thrown at us from time to time. So don't let that discourage you. It's a community project, and so one of the ways we take ownership is by recognizing we're all in this together, and I'm going to do my share, but I need you all to come along with me. So keep the public informed. These kind of dashboards and other reports out are a good way to do that. The other reason that you want to continually be monitoring performance is so literally you can update your plans. A lot of times, you know, plans are out become outdated as soon as they're created. And so whatever performance monitoring you do, that should take into consideration a way to update the plans as needed. Strategic plans really don't become better with age. In fact, they only become effective when they are able to get things done and people continually build on them. And, what's the next level that we can be working on here? And so I like to continually update plans based on those progress reports and whatever the objective data is. But other times, people say, no, we're just going to go back and look at this on an annual basis, and that's okay. It's important at some point to go back and look to see what we've gotten done and maybe what we're going to prioritize for the new year. I like to do that a bit more frequently and to treat it as a living document that does get changed every quarter or every time that you do the review, whatever that looks like. But set a time to do that review, to take a look at it, to discuss it, and to push it back out to the community to see, are we there yet? What else do we need to be doing? Some of you are familiar with Professor Deming, as he grew up here in Wyoming, but one of the amazing things that he introduced to the manufacturing industry back in the 50s was his cycle of continuous improvement, where you plan whatever the problem might be, come up with a plan, I should say, and then you do it. You execute that plan, and then you look back over your shoulder and study what you were able to do and identify what maybe you've learned from it, and then take action to update the plan and move to the next cycle. It's a continual management discipline that everything you do, you plan it, and then you execute that plan. Take a look to see what went right, what went wrong, tweak it, make it better, and you go on the next day. So do the same thing. This works with every kind of strategic plan. Do it. Develop your action steps so that they're manageable and that you can get them done. And then look over your own shoulder to determine how well it went and what might need to be done differently the next go around. And go right back in and reset the plan each time you do it. This is another reason, incidentally, why I think communities should set up a planning website for their municipality and just keep it on your website all the time. It shouldn't be a link to click on our 1977 comprehensive development plan because we haven't looked at it for the last 40 or 50 years. No, it should be a document, just like your municipal code is a series of documents. It's a living, breathing body of work, and so keep it alive. Let people know that you still want their input and that you can still get things done. So, any questions then about the presentation so far? Justin, I'll see if I can turn this back over to you for questions.
Thanks, Joe. Does anybody have any questions on strategic planning for Joe? Anything that he covered today, or possibly any questions that you've thought about from the first session on the roles and responsibilities and meetings? I don't see any hands raised. I don't see anything. Oh, hold on. There is a question here, Joe. Can we use Six Sigma tools with planning?
Yes, you can. There have been some efforts that Manufacturing Works had used previously to make that translation. It's been some years since I've worked at it, but yeah, I think all of those planning concepts, lean manufacturing is another one that I think applies very well to municipal operations, where we're eliminating as much waste as possible, and that frees up limited resources to be used elsewhere. So yeah, it can be used.
Good question, Sherry. Thank you for that. Anybody else have any other questions? I don't, not seeing any hands. Obviously, Joe and I are both available via email. Feel free to reach out if you do think of anything in the interim between here and next Friday. More than happy to answer all those questions. And again, just like last week, I'll send out an email on Monday that'll have the video link back to this particular presentation, as well as the PowerPoint as a PDF to where you can scroll through. And Joe does a really, really nice job with those, where they've got his presentation notes as well. So it's not just the slides kind of with no context. If you didn't get a chance to check that out, he has all of his notes in there. So it really makes for a good informational document. We will meet again next Friday, again at 3 p.m. Next week's subject will be ethics and conflicts of interest. And again, Amy Bach, the city attorney of the city of Rollins, will be presenting that for us. So that'll be a good session. Always an impactful one, especially for new elected leaders, just to kind of understand where those bright lines are with ethics and conflicts of interest, especially in small town government. Sometimes those can be a little blurrier to begin with when everybody knows everybody and those sorts of situations. So it's good information to have in your back pocket as you start to move forward as elected officials. So if nobody else has any other questions at this point, we'll turn you loose a little bit early this week. Everybody can get to their Friday afternoon, even though the weather's hopefully is nicer than the weather out my window, and you can get to enjoy it a little bit. But I hope everybody has a great weekend. And again, if you have any questions, need any extra information in the meantime, please feel free to reach out, and I'll do my best to take care of you. So with that, thanks again for everybody attending, and we'll see you next Friday.
Thanks, Justin.
You bet, Joe. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You bet, of course. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.